Welcome back to the world with Randall Williams, and you already know we're here for it. Episode 6 dropped on Thursday, and I thought it was stellar. I think that there was a lot of people in my comments, or more people than usual in my comments, who were against me calling episode 5 a bit of a filler. Um, but I stand by it. I stand by that, even though it was a good episode, and I think it's a better filler than maybe some other shows have. And a building block, I think you could call it there. But I think there's a way that you define filler, and I'm not saying that that episode was useless. I just don't think that it built upon the season the way that some of the other episodes in this season have. Um, we'll see when we see those characters return, and I could be proven wrong, and I'll get on here and be like, "Wow, look how dumb I look," because none of us are perfect. And I think this episode gets back to the main storyline. We see Aaron Paul play Powerplex, who's quite the interesting character, and immediately when the episode opens, we get a different perspective on Invincible's fight with Omni-Man, Mark's fight with Nolan, however you want, dad versus son, however you want to categorize it. You see Powerplex and his sister and his niece go into the building, and then that's the building that eventually Mark can't stop from falling. And, he kind of just spirals into a bit of a depression and a rageful depression, I'd say. And, from there, you see Powerplex basically go to a district attorney and try to convince them to prosecute Invincible when, like, a normal person recognizes who's not there is like, what is happening right now? Omni-Man is beating up his son. Some of this just doesn't make sense, but they recognize that, even though thousands of lives were lost, that Invincible was fighting on the right side of things, even though he got the shit beat out of him. So, and you see the district attorney being like, yo, like, what are we gonna do? Like, you do know, like, he was on the good side, right? And Powerplex is relentless. Like, he does not give up, and he believes what he believes. So he takes things to the next level, and you see the Pentagon testing equipment. Of course, like, someone has been stealing equipment. It's obviously him. And there's dialogue about, Mark's fight with Anissa, and even if he was maxed out, could he have won? And all these different things that the group of the scientists are talking about. And the whole time, like, Powerplex is still very angry. And then we cut to, of course, Mark training Oliver, or Kid Omni Man, which is still a hilarious name. But you cut to Mark training Oliver, and as little brothers, they don't like to listen to big brothers. And you see Eve give him direction, and that's pretty much, I think, the important thing is that Oliver is learning how to be a hero. And it doesn't really matter how he's learning, as long as he's receptive to things. But the next scene is, I think, is important because there was something that they didn't show. And I believe that's episode 3, where when Oliver kills the Mauler twins, which is a scene I've spoken about, where um, Oliver's talking to Mark, and I'll put the comic up on screen. And he asked Mark, like, don't you think dad was right? And they cut, and Mark says sometimes. And I think maybe that's because they didn't put that in there, because we didn't see Mark switch gears from, being more willing to kill right away. Like, that's not necessarily what's happened in the show. He's been very reluctant to kill, even from accidentally killing Angstrom Levy to then having to kill King Immortal. And then, we're at this episode now where he's, throughout this entire thing, he's grieving. So, when Oliver's talking to him, he's like missing his dad, and he doesn't know where he is. He hasn't seen him in a long time, but he remembers everything because, Thraxans have really good memory. He remembers when he was basically a baby, and he remembers even when Mark was fighting Angstrom the first time, and he misses him. And Mark is trying to explain to him, like, first of all, he understands that he's not human. So he's trying to explain it to him in a way that is like, look, like, he can't come back. Like, people are not going to rock with him, even if he saves so many people, just because he turned on us, and he turned on the humans, and he killed so many people. So you just see the difference in Thraxans, or the Thraxan culture in Oliver versus human culture in Mark, and Mark trying to wrestle with that, where he does still have love for his dad, but it's a difficult topic. Um, I think Powerplex and Aaron Paul did just a fabulous job throughout this entire episode of just like of voice acting, because I'm used to Aaron Paul and like Breaking Bad, and his regular voice, and throughout this entire thing, it kind of sounds like he's strained. And I think that's a good representation of how Powerplex really is. He's strained the entire time. Like he's um, frustrated and rageful and irritated and just sad all together. Like he's feeling so many different emotions from the Chicago attack. And and you see him like practicing this speech with his wife and kid in the living room, and you see him lose control slightly, and that kind of leads into like what happens. And some it's funny, like some of this dialogue is taken almost directly from the book, and I love when comics do that. Another comic that did that was Batman Under the Red Hood, and that book, I mean, they cut different things out of it, but I'm pretty sure animating was probably the hardest job because it was almost copy paste from the book to uh that animated movie. So I think that was watching Powerplex was fun. You see after that Debbie is moving on with Paul, dating Paul, and Paul is adjusting to things, and she's just trying to become comfortable with dating somebody again. And I think she's doing a good job. Like last season, we kind of saw her grieving, and this season, she's taking an acceptance to him, even though he's not always comfortable with things. Mark goes out on a date, and uh, you see Amber show up with her boyfriend, and they're broadcasting the fight because what's his name? Powerplex shows up to bring out Invincible, and nobody shows up. And right before he's about to say he wants Invincible, Mark turns the TV off, and he has a conversation with Amber. Amber's moved on. It's just a very peaceful conversation, and it shows the work-life balance that Mark has been trying to find throughout this entire season. Um, and we see after that Shapesmith shows up, and Shapesmith always cracks me up because his voice actor just says things like it almost feels like um, if a dog had a device that could make them talk like Shapesmith kind of talks like that. He just talks and says things that are just like the most generic things ever. But they fit the scene and as an alien and as a Martian, as someone who's like snuck on Earth and is kind of just like, I'll just be here. Um, and of course, like Shapesmith gets his ass whooped, and then Powerplex flies off, and he's just throughout the episode. He's doing these constant check-ins. He's trying to get Invincible's attention. He fails, and then he goes back home to his wife, and his wife is like, "You tripping? Like, come on, bro! Like, you supposed to be doing the job, yada yada yada." And she's encouraging him throughout this entire process. And when he goes back home, he sort of loses control when he remembers the passing of his family again, like the light bulb burst. And it again alludes to what eventually happens at the end of the episode. We then cut to uh, Robot. He cures Monster Girl, and they're bonding. Like, I think that when I first watched Invincible and I had no idea about anything, I was very skeptical of Robot just because, he was always doing something weird. He was always doing something weird. So um, he does something nice here. And I think that, that storyline between Robot and Monster Girl is going to play out in seasons to come and go to places you could never expect it. And right after that, Shrinking Ray quits. She doesn't want to be on um, the team. She's decided that after being injured last season by the Lizard League, excuse me, after being injured, that she's like, I don't know. And I think that another thing that was on her mind in this is like Cecil's conversation where like his job is to protect the world, and as long as heroes are emerging, he's just going to use them. And it doesn't feel like if Cecil is willing to put a bomb in Invincible's head and not necessarily protect him, and also hire criminals, then how does a hero fit within that? And so she decides that she's going to quit. She has a conversation with Rexplode where Rexplode is telling her like, this is basically all I got. And Rexplode's journey throughout this season has just been incredible. I think he's gone from prick to polished, and it's still funny. Like he's still hilarious because he has to catch himself not be an asshole. Um, but a really emotional scene between the two of them where Rexplode is like, "Look, the government changed my last name, and Rexplode is all that I know." And she's like, "I'm done." Right as they were about to start dating, even though they had a good time, and now we'll see where things go for the two of them from here. And right after that, Mark is at the memorial, we see the funny scene where they're flying with the car to Chicago, and we see the scene where Mark is grieving the people who died in the Chicago attack because of him, because Cecil sheltered him from those things. And a large part of that just because like, he can focus. Like a mind is a big part of being a superhero, and you don't want your best superhero distracted all the time. So we see that, and then of course like Powerplex shows up. He fights Eve. Eve wins that battle, traps him. The Guardians transport him what's supposed to be the prison. He breaks out by slamming himself and getting the kinetic energy up. And then he does the exact same thing. This time he uses his wife and child, and uses them as bait to bring Invincible out. And that's accurate to the comics as well. Now, this whole arc, what I enjoy about this episode is that they expand this story a lot more. And like what comes next in the show is such a big part in this book that like this part with Powerplex is fairly small. Like there's characters that pop up in this series that fight, and I'm saying in this specific section. Um, but I just think they did a really good job of telling this emotional journey of someone who's grieving but doesn't know how to grieve, doesn't know how to like process it. And after at that point, Powerplex and Invincible shows up, and one of the things that I've been watching to see is how the animation kind of portrays Invincible's power. And we've seen him like kind of cut loose from it started in Angstrom Levy. I think it continued as throughout the first three episodes, and then popping what's his name? Popping King Immortal's head off. And then of course we see him like roundhouse kick the fuck out of Powerplex into the I guess some pillars and some debris in Chicago. And when Invincible, they're having this dialogue where Mark is like, "Look, I'm not hitting you. I kind of know how this works. When I hit you, you get stronger, you get more powerful." And he goes to save his wife and kid, and she spits in his face. Um, Powerplex shows up and supercharges, and as we saw, he lost control in the first time. He fried the TV. The second time, he had a light bulb, and now he fries his wife and his kid. Um, and at that point, like Mark takes him to prison, um, and or he he fights him a little bit. He tries to supercharge himself again, and then Mark just subdues him, takes him to prison. They have a short conversation, and then Mark is grieving again. Like this isn't the life that I think Mark wants to live in as someone who's 19 and doesn't have a mentor anymore, or really any that many relationships that he really trusts and believes in. He's back on the roof, and him and Eve are about to talk about it, and then you see that orb show up again, and we see that Angstrom Levy is still alive. Um, and with a lot more Invincibles, with so many different costumes and designs. I love a lot of those costumes and designs, and I'm a guy who I enjoy when superheroes change their costumes. Like you always enjoy the classics, but when you get a change, sometimes like it's sort of like changing clothes. Like you feel different. You might um your outfit might give you superpowers in a sense of real life. And now in comics, of course, it's just always fun to see superheroes switch things up just a tad bit. And seeing all these different designs that I imagine Rob Kirkman played with when designing Invincible and creating this character is fun. I think that going back to this episode, you see the journey of Mark continue and the relationship between him and Eve build. Like she has become his rock. He needs to talk through a lot of different things, and she's the person that he does it with while also managing his relationship with his brother. And that's a difficult thing for him. And you can see it weighing heavy on him as he processes the emotions throughout this season. And I think that the best way that I can and describe what's coming next is everything that he has experienced throughout this season is going to climax in the best way possible for us uh as viewers. I think that when you see what Angstrom Levy has assembled, you have to wonder what he's planning and what that looks like, and how the next two episodes are going to play out. I can't say too much on them because they are that momentous. They are incredible. These are two of my favorite issues in the comic for sure. This is, as I've said when I tease this is when Invincible as a show turns the corner. And when you, as I said before, I think in season one of Invincible, it lived in pop culture. There were so many different memes and things that were created out of episode 7 and 8. And season two didn't have that moment necessarily because of the break. And now, like, season three is in prime position, prime position. Like, we're going to have like MLB opening day, and you think about all of these award shows and things like that. Like, this couldn't be better. You have March 6th and March 13th, and they own that. They own that real estate. I think the Daredevil comes back, of course. You have 1923, you have Severance, you have these different shows, but a moment that everyone can come together for, if you're watching, like, this is feels like it. And I don't know that if it will be as impactful or as big as season one, just because the pandemic was going on and everybody was glued to their TV back then, and not by choice. But these next two episodes, man, I honestly might have to stay up and watch till, like, I think it comes on at 2 or 3. I might have to. I just might have to, because uh, they're gonna be incredible. But this episode was stellar. This episode, I thought the animation was incredible. I thought that they did a better job. Incredible's pushing it, but they did a better job with the animation this episode, and I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. So overall, I would give this episode an A, and we'll have to see where things continue. But that's all I got for you all today. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you all think of episode 6 and what you're expecting out of episode 7 and 8. But um, hope you all are having a good weekend, and that's all I got. This is The World with Randall Williams. See you all next time.